This is the Aston Martin DB12 Volante. It's worth around 700,000 Australian dollars. That is much more money than I've ever seen in my entire lifetime. And this car costs more than what I bought a full-sized house for back home in Adelaide. And somehow, Aston Martin Melbourne have decided that I deserve the keys to this for a week. So in today's video, we're going to run through exactly what it's like to have a car as expensive as this and as luxurious as this, and what it's like to live with as a normal dude. Now, this isn't going to be your standard generic car review. There's plenty of those that exist on YouTube for this car already. This video is more focused around what it's actually like to live with this thing as a normal person. But we do have to start with the basics because this is obviously quite a special car. The DB12 dropped the V12 that you'd find in the DB11, but instead replaced it with a Mercedes V8 twin turbo. That gives you 670 horsepower and a top speed of 325 kilometers per hour. Not that we can hit that on our drive to Coles this afternoon, but it shows you what we're playing with here. And we're going to actually look at, is this car possible to be daily driven in Melbourne in 2025? To find out what it's like, I'm going to take it to places I frequent often. The hills, lots of Melbourne traffic, the shops, the gym, and where I am most Sundays are cars and coffee. And for a little bit of a BTS reality shot for you, if we're talking about practicality and what this car's like to live with, you can take it away for a weekend, but considering there's not much boot space back here, I wouldn't recommend that you take it away for too long. Or if you do, I hope that you pack light. You don't want to take all your designer clothes with you. The best way that I can describe the driving experience of this car is like a private jet that is being piloted by a Russian fighter pilot. It is full-blown aggression. It shouldn't be flown like that, but it is because of the person behind the wheel. And for someone like me, who absolutely loves purebred, motorsport-derived street cars, I do feel like a bit of an idiot jumping behind the wheel like this, because it's not the car that you're supposed to be absolutely fanging around the mountains, but it's such good fun, and truly you do get over that sense of it being worth so much because the car does inspire you with a lot of confidence. One negative that I do have is that the back end does feel very light, so you have to be pretty careful of that. And I think for me, that's the scary part, is not knowing whether you'll come out the other side, but it's also what's going to make it a very interesting driving experience. Now, I must say, I do feel a little bit out of my depth in this car because it's not my usual cup of tea. This is in a completely different conversation to the cars that I aspire to own. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I absolutely love my German cars like BMWs, Porsches. I love my JDM cars like Nissan Skylines, but this is just in a whole different league. It almost feels like I shouldn't be allowed to drive this car just because of the value of it. And as a normal person, this car, for me to buy this, would take years and years and years. And if I stayed in a 9-to-5 job like I do now, I might genuinely never have a chance to actually afford a car like this in my lifetime. So I think the experience of actually being able to get to drive this car and throw the top down, feel how luxurious it is on the inside, actually makes me more hungry to be able to afford one day, because it does inspire you. It does show you that these things are tangible, that these things are real. And once you get over the fear of how expensive this car is, it does actually make you feel pretty cool. It's hard not to drive this car and feel like a movie star. Like, I feel like a celebrity. People look at you like you're a celebrity. You know, I feel like James Bond in this car. And it's truly that emotion that I think sets Aston Martin apart, and while they'll always be one of the more luxurious brands that I can really get behind. A lot of the other more luxury-oriented supercar brands I just can't vibe with because they don't really interest me. I don't really find a sense of connection with them. But given how much I love James Bond, the very original DB5 is my favourite classic car of all time. It just makes sense that this natural progression in supercar form would connect to me. But actually getting behind the wheel of it is a really special experience. Now that we're coming up to a stop, this is really one of my first drives in this car, and the first thing that I do notice about the interior is that it does not feel like a car. It genuinely feels like a luxury hotel room on wheels. Like I feel like I don't deserve to be inside something like this. The steering wheel, just everything is just nice. It just feels like old money. It smells like old money. And the funny thing for me is that I'm so used to being in cars like old BMWs, my JZX100 Toyota Chaser, other old Japanese cars that just have that distinctive smell of just cheap economy. But that's, you know, that smell that we all love as enthusiasts, particularly that BMW smell that's just all the way through the BMW leather interiors. And getting into this, it literally smells brand new. The feel of the leather is different. Everything about this car is just built for pure elegance and class. Like this interior and this experience, the ride height, the comfort, like everything is just the epitome of upmarket and bespoke craftsmanship. And it is such a beautiful place to be. And the thing is now is like, people always say to me, once you fly business class or first class, you can never go back to economy. And I've never really understood it. And I feel like I'm flying in first class right now. And going back to the Chaser after this, which is probably worse than economy, is going to be a very hard thing indeed. So I certainly see why this interior justifies the price tag. I think I've sat in a lot of cars, a lot of high-end cars that just don't really feel that nice, but this, out of everything, genuinely feels the best out of all of those upmarket cars that I've had experiences with. But after all the fun of driving it through the twisties, we get back to this. Normal Melbourne traffic, which in a normal car is stressful enough, but in this thing just takes a whole new level to stress on the roads. You become so hypersensitive of every single movement of all the other cars. And I think the scariest thing for me driving this car is the fact that firstly it's not mine, and obviously I am insured to drive it, but it's also the fact that it's just so expensive. And I haven't run the figures in my head of how much insurance costs, but I would expect that this thing at this value, if I was to have this at my age, would be probably well north of like $10,000 a month. So that's the scary part. So it is very anxiety inducing driving this thing in normal traffic. I don't think that's a problem if you're someone who can afford this car, because if you can afford to buy this car once, the chances of you being able to buy another one should it get written off are pretty high too. But once you do clear out the open road, man, is this thing comfortable. I do feel very lucky to be having this opportunity, so thank you to everyone who does support these videos. This is pretty special today.
But the real test of how much I like living with the DB12 is much more important than a Sunday drive. Before even taking it to the shops, I wanted to hit up my favourite place to be on a Sunday morning, a car meet. Remember how I mentioned that the DB12 makes you feel like a rock star? I said that while we were by ourselves up in the mountains. Pulling up to a car meet in this thing, with the roof off, turns that feeling up to infinity. I barely got time to leave the car all morning, and we were there for a good 4 hours. Whether it was showing friends the car, discussing it with strangers, or just taking the time to admire it myself, it certainly drew a lot of attention.
Hello. Thank you.
Oh man, this is living now. How good is this? Top down, sun's out, cool cars on the road. I get the vibe now. Never have I taken a car to a Cars and Coffee event that has so much undeniable aura. That's like the best way that I can describe the DB12. It's just straight up aura.
After you leave the car meet and absolutely gun it all the way home, the next thing you're likely going to have to do is to fill up your Aston Martin. If you don't drive your DB12 like I do, you'll get around 12.2 litres per 100 kilometres. I got closer to 15 or 16, so naturally I sapped the tank. Filling it up will cost you about $160 or so Australian, depending on the price of fuel at the time. This is pretty comparable to the RS7 and the RS6 that I've had for the past couple of weeks, so this isn't too much of a crazy cost here. However, I don't even think this is worth explaining, because if you've got the money for a car like this, you're not going to be stressed about what you're paying at the Bowser. But for me, that's a week's worth of groceries that I chewed through in about 3 days. The next step was, of course, to try out some more real-world uses for a $700,000 Super Tourer.
And because this is a video about testing the DB12 in the real world as a normal person, I'm doing what many normal people do, which is drive home after work down Melbourne Road towards Toorak, where you're likely to live if you have one of these cars, at 6:30 p.m. on a Monday night. Dailying this car, I mean, you can do it, but whether you actually want to do it is a whole separate discussion. I think for me, like, I've never sat so far back off the car in front of me. But every time someone creeps up just that little bit further behind me, I can see them in my rearview mirror and I just automatically get really tense. It's just, this is a sort of car that you wish you just had permanent balustrades or bubble wrap around when you're driving it. So that's why I say you can daily this. And I suppose if you want to daily this, you would have enough money to be able to go out and replace it in a millisecond anyway if it did get written off. Whereas for me, this car, as I said at the start of the video, it's worth more money with several multipliers applied to that than I've ever seen in my entire lifetime. And unless I do really well in the lotto or this YouTube thing takes off, then I will probably ever see. And it's worth more than my house. It's literally worth more than my house, so it does make it quite stressful to drive around. My biggest takeaway, I think, so far from the DB12 is that you don't just simply drive this car, you babysit this car. You are so hyper vigilant of the movements of every other car on the road. You're looking at bikes, you're looking at people. There's this RAV4 trying to merge now in front of me, a BMW behind me trying to merge. It's just terrifying. And even though the other people on the road are probably more scared of this car than I am, it still comes with that extra element of total terror when you're driving it, even at 40 k's per hour. Because if you know anything about Melbourne drivers, they are some of the most aggressive on the road. And I found there's two different reactions that people have to this car. They either think that you're a Nepo baby or you're a trust fund baby, and they will just treat you like crap, or they will totally get out of your way. It's probably the third actually. They will merge over into your lane because they're just like gobsmacked staring at the car out of their passenger window. However, we are about to get to the shops now, because of course when you have a car like this, part of the experience of living with it is to take it shopping. And I think this could well be the single most stressful thing I do while I'm behind the wheel of this Aston. Sweet Jesus. Holy, oh my God. Oh, that was a bit skinny. I've never driven up a ramp so slowly in my entire life. And now that we have made it to the shops, this is the only reasonable and feasible location to actually park the DB12. Up here on the rooftop with no other cars in sight, where it's safe and sound to go downstairs and do our shopping. And with a car like this, taking it to the shops almost seems like a bit of a stupid idea, because how could you possibly walk away from this thing without turning back to take a picture every few seconds? So that is a small glimpse into what it's like to live with a $700,000 Aston Martin for a week. For me, this car isn't about price. It's not about the speed. It's not about being able to flex that you have an Aston Martin. For me, this car is about feeling. Whether it's feeling anxiety when you're at the shops, feeling like a celebrity when you're on the road, or feeling like a total superhero when you're cruising in comfort past all the regular traffic, this car delivers it all. The question you've probably been wondering for this entire video now is whether I would buy an Aston Martin DB12. And honestly, the answer is no. And it's not because I don't like the car. In fact, I absolutely loved it. I've never driven something that's made me feel like James Bond or the closest thing to a superhero. This car is the epitome of elegance and upmarket class. I don't think any manufacturers are doing it better than Aston Martin in that luxury car market right now. The real reason that I wouldn't own a car like this is because it is worth 700,000 Australian dollars. And it's not for the fact that I can't ever begin to dream of even affording a car like that. It's because for 700 grand, there are probably, I would say at least 50, maybe not 50, let's say 25 to 30 of my dream cars that I would rather buy before this. Make of that what you will, that's just my personal opinion. Today's video isn't a car review, it's a reminder that sometimes even when you think you'll never get there to the level of being able to afford something like this Aston Martin DB12, sometimes in life you get a glimpse, and that's enough to keep going. I just want to say a massive shout out to Aston Martin Melbourne for throwing me the keys to this DB12 for the week. I'd love to know what you think of it in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. My name's Pat. This is 2PJZ. Stay driven, chase your dreams. This is proof that they can come true. See you in the next one.